Miami kicked off their 6-game road trip with a heartbreaking double overtime loss in Sacramento. And while the game showed some tenacity from the Heat, it also highlighted some of their biggest problems moving forward. We break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Got a bunch of stuff to get to today, including a little bit of a deeper look in Jaime Jaquez Jr.'s season. We got some questions to get to later in the show. Recording this late on Monday night after the Heat lost in double overtime to the Kings in Sacramento, 123-118. The Heat were up 17 points midway through the fourth quarter, but missed free throws down the stretch. DeMar DeRozan scoring the Kings' last 9 points in the second overtime period, 18 offensive rebounds for the game for the Kings. Basically sums it up. That's a tough loss to start this road trip, David. And it could cost them a chance to win Tuesday night in the second night of a back-to-back in Golden State, a game that they have to just play here in a couple hours, it feels like. There's a good chance that the Heat could start what could be the post-Jimmy Butler era, 0-3, having lost that Saturday night game against the Jazz at home. But back to this game, what stood out to you in this one?
Yeah, it was a demoralizing loss to me because they were up 17 in the fourth quarter. And then you knew that Sacramento was going to make a bit of a run. They've done this a lot during the Doug Christie era, tightening up their defense.
They're 5-1 now with him.
Yeah, they've shown some pluck, right? Some pluckiness they didn't really have under Mike Brown for much of the season, and I don't think it was due to his presence or anything like that. I think Brown's a fine coach, but they've just shown a little bit more energy under Christie, and you knew that they were going to be able to mount a comeback, and sure enough, they did. But Miami just sort of collapsed, and they weren't able to get the kind of production from Bam Adebayo that they should. Like we talked about it in the last episode, that he might be dealing with a lot. And I think a lot of our listeners kind of took those comments and are frustrated. Oh, the max contract, he deserves more. Why are we babying him? Why are we making excuses? Maybe those are valid. I disagree with much of the commentary. I hate to talk about, a contract and holding a player's worth up to that contract because he was awarded for what he had done and what he's capable of doing. But I'll be honest, tonight was one of those nights where he certainly did not earn that deal. 3 of 13 in the first 48 minutes of regulation, 3 of 6 in the double overtime periods, finished just 6 of 19 for 18 points. Not a great night for him. And you need more from him. When you're getting the kind of production from Domantas Sabonis, when you're a guy like DeMar DeRozan is stepping up, they had Keegan Murray, they had Malik Monk, no De'Aaron Fox in the Sacramento lineup. This is a game that Miami probably should have won a lot more easily. And, you and I were talking about this during the game. They just showed like a completely different personality than what we had seen against the Utah Jazz on Saturday. They were moving with pace. They were matching Sacramento's high pace, fast intensity, etc. Khalil Ware had some big moments. They had a lot of players stepping up. Jaime Jaquez, who we'll talk about a little bit later. And just everything seemed to be clicking, and you didn't really need Bam as much. But when push comes to shove and when they make their comeback late in the fourth quarter, that's when Bam needs to step up the most. And that just wasn't the case. And so A disappointing loss. And I think it falls not squarely on Bam, but mostly on his as the team's captain.
The Kings had 3 different guys score more points than Bam Adebayo in this game. Bam needs to be better. And if Jimmy Butler's not going to be a part of this team anymore, which it seems like that's a matter of when and not if, then Bam needs to be better. Tyler Hero was great tonight, 26 points. He had a huge first quarter to kind of kickstart things for Miami. Had his moments in the second half. Jaime Jaquez Jr. had his moments as well. But it's Bam. It's Bam, and he needs to be better. He goes 0 for 2 in the fourth quarter for 0 points. He were up 17 with 8 minutes left in this game. 17 points. And I've made the joke to you before. It's like, what's even the point of playing the first 43 minutes of any Miami Heat game? Because you just flip a coin, tell me which team is up 5, and then roll the ball out, because it feels like that every game is like that. And man, it is so frustrating when that happens again. This was a game they should have won. There is no excuse. No De'Aaron Fox for the Kings in this game. Miami was up 17 midway through the fourth quarter. This is as bad a loss as they've had all season. And I know it's on the road, and I know it's without Jimmy Butler and all these things. But when you're going to try to make a statement, this is the statement. This is the time to make it. We're on the road, starting this road trip that we all think is going to be really good for us. No Jimmy Butler, who's back home serving a suspension. We got to win this game. And this was especially a chance for Bam to make a statement. And unfortunately, he didn't. And there are just things that he's doing that, frankly, I don't really understand. There's missed shots in the post and things like that, and that's just been sort of part and parcel for this season for whatever reason. But when he gets the board, when he gets the rebound, the defensive rebound, and he starts pushing it up the court, and then he just stops at the 3-point line and looks for somebody to kind of come over and take the ball from him on a dribble handoff.
That's not his
I'm
game.
like banging on the table, like, just keep going. He had one moment in the second half where he kept going and he drew a foul. And that is there for him. That's when Bam is at his best. He is an awesome transition player when he kind of goes into that mode. And for whatever reason this year, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's something about the 5-out offense and trying to generate more threes or being a better teammate, whatever it is. But when you rip that ball off the defensive glass and you're in the open court, he needs to go all the way to the rim and either force the defense to rotate or draw a foul. Because more times than not, when he's doing that, that's what happens. And I literally tweeted it during the game in the first half, and he does it in the second half and draws a foul. And I'm like, there it is. Do that more. And I just feel like if he were to do that more often, we would just see a lot more of his game just sort of follow along with it.
Yeah, I can't blame the offense, nor can I blame Erik Spoelstra for that, because Nikola Jovic attacks the rim when he pulls down those rebounds in transition. Jaime Jaquez does that. Tyler Hero does it. Terry Rozier. It's everybody. Every other starter, with the exception of Bam Adebayo and Haywood Highsmith, that's not the strength of his game, and nor will it ever be. They do that with frequency. It's just Bam. And I think either there is a reluctance on his part, a physical matter that we're not familiar with. I don't know. I can't say for certain, and these aren't excuses that we're making for him, but there just seems to be a block there.
Is it the yips?
Whether it's mental or physical, I don't know. Like I said, there's a block. That much is certain. Whether it's mental or physical, that remains to be seen. And I don't know if we'll ever get that kind of revelation from him, because I don't think he's wired that way.
No, there's got to be a reason. Is it a lack of handle? Is it like he sees two guys in front of him and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to stop here. It feels like he's not even looking up. It's like a quarterback scrambling out of the pocket that's just like kind of looking at, instead of looking downfield, is just sort of looking to escape. And it just feels like that's what Bam's doing. He's not really looking downfield. He's just sort of, I got the ball. I'm at the 3-point line. Let me stop here and let's get into our half-court offense. And I'm like, Miami hasn't had a good half-court offense in years. Try to avoid the half-court offense as much as you can. And for some reason, Bam, he keeps doing that. And the paint touches come and go. I thought he had some really big offensive rebounds down the stretch of this game.
Sure.
There was the effort is always there with him, which is that's the craziest thing. Like, he was playing so hard in that second overtime period. He was the hardest playing player in that second for both teams, I thought. Maybe him and Sabonis, but he was giving it his all, and that shot just won't fall.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I see the effort there. I wonder, again, it might be just a combination of these factors of like him exerting himself so much on the other side of the ball that he wants to conserve some of his energy offensively, and that's why he's not attacking the basket. I can't say for certain. I don't think he'll answer that if he was asked, and I have no clue as to what the difference is. But he seems much more passive now. This season has definitely been a season of regression for him, and I know that's kind of an understatement. A lot of fans will say, "No kidding."
I don't think that's an understatement. I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's so much frustration with him because, like, it seemed like he was going to be peaking, not regressing. Like, he was going to be hitting another level. I remember saying during our wild predictions that I thought they were going to turn the keys over to Bam, because that just felt like that's the nature of how the team was moving forward, is that they were going to be taking a step back from Jimmy, that they were going to be promoting Tyler and Bam, And as such, that Bam was going to be able to be much more productive, especially if the three-point shot was falling with regularity, and that he was going to be able to blend the aspects that we had already seen that were the strengths of his game, along with new facets of his offense and the three-point shot, et cetera, and being able to create off the drives. That just hasn't manifested. Not only is the three-point shot not falling, he had 1 of 5 attempts today, but there were a number of possessions where he was wide open from the perimeter and he doesn't take it. So, I mean, he put up 5 attempts. He probably could have taken 10
think
today.
it's passive. I don't think it's passivity with him, though. I mean, he took the second most shot attempts on the team. He took 5 3-pointers in this game. The problem is the shot's not going in. Like, his touch has evaporated. It's not just the touch from the 3-point line, which he's never really proven to have at the NBA level, but it's the stuff in the paint. It's the hook shot. It's all this stuff that was his bread and butter just have been sort of zapped away from him. And it really is unexplainable, but they need better from Bam. It's a lot to ask of him. He's done a lot. We just got done talking about it. Feels like everything that goes wrong ends up trickling down to Bam Adebayo's plate, and he's the one who has to eat it. But he does need to be better, especially in a game like this. You can't get outplayed by DeMar DeRozan at this point. Like, in double overtime. It's just it's hard. Meanwhile, there's plenty of blame to go around. Jaime Jaquez Jr. missed some key free throws down the stretch of that first overtime period. But to be a little bit more optimistic here, the Heat may have figured out a way to get his season back on track. We're going to talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed, that's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. All you have to do is visit the website, and you can share betting lines around your team or league, but only when you visit FanDuel.com and join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter. One stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. So it was Jaime Jaquez Jr.'s first triple-double of his career. 16 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists. Did miss those 2 free throws at the end of that first overtime period. Man, that was killer, David. That was like, there was no reason for this game to be in overtime, period. And certainly no reason for this thing to go to a second overtime, but it just felt like it was one of those nights. But without dwelling on so much of the negatives, because we know what happened already, I kind of trying to think about how we can go forward with this. I really liked how they had Jaime. I like how they used Jaime in this game. So Spo switches up the starting lineup for the third straight game, really. Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Haywood Highsmith, and Bam Adebayo. So Jaime gets the spot from Nico from the last game. And right away, you can see how they were trying to use Jaime. He was going to be a point forward. He was going to play point guard, which apparently Jimmy Butler didn't want to do, but we don't have to talk about that right now. He was going to be the point guard of this offense. They were using Tyler Hero off the ball quite a bit. That kind of helped spark his offense early in this game. And, you know, those 10 assists for Jaime Jaquez Jr. were huge. I love the way he was able to push the pace. I love the way that he was able to kind of get involved. You feel the ball in your hands, and suddenly, like, the shots start to go in a little bit more. You're a little bit more comfortable. He goes 7 of 15 from the field overall for 16 points. This, to me, is the way for Jaime. What about you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was also a matter of the matchup. Like, he was being guarded by DeMar DeRozan. DeRozan, for all of his veteran savvy and everything else like that, never known as a really solid defender. And
Great
so
point.
he was able to kind of maximize his opportunities, attack him, use his physicality to kind of create a little space there. If DeRozan managed to take a bump and kind of match that level of physicality, then Jaime had usually somebody cutting or maybe somebody in the dunker spot so he could just dump the ball off and get some of those assists, or find somebody out from the perimeter and they were able to knock down those shots. So it was a great night from him. And yeah, I think we'll continue to see that moving forward. Like, a lot of people saying that the team needs to acquire a point guard. We had a conversation about that following the season-ending injury to Drew Smith and what they wound up doing with a roster spot. They added Isaiah Stevens as a 2-way contract, but they haven't really played him at the NBA level yet. And I don't think that there's any kind of rush until this Jimmy Butler situation is sorted out to acquire a point guard. And I think a performance from Jaime kind of underscores that, is that you don't really need it. You've got guys that can make plays and still create offense for others and settle the team down and kind of help everybody get into their sets and create opportunities. There's enough there between Tyler, between Terry, between Bam, Jaime, Nico. You've got guys on this team that have the skill and versatility to make plays for others. So that's why the point guard position isn't necessarily one of need. At the same time, Jaime's season has been up and down, mostly down. And I think the 3-point shot continues to be a concern. He's shooting worse than he did last year as a rookie. It's never been his strength, but there was progress there. It looked like he was making some incremental growth in terms of his release and everything else like that. It seemed more fluid, but then that kind of crashed when he was injured. It's just been a difficult way of assessing Jaquez in his second season. And again, a lot of those games earlier in the season looked like, they had kind of figured out his limited versatility or his repertoire in terms of the way he attacks the basket. But if you put the ball in his hands, I think that creates a little bit more space for him to attack, use that strength, use that speed. And it looks like he's back to full strength too. So I think the injury was probably a lingering issue for him. And that's probably what limited a lot of his efficiency. But it looks like now he's back to full strength. And as such, you're starting to see a revitalized version of what he can do. And I think this is going to be, hopefully, the norm moving forward.
A little bit more pep in his step. I mean, you could see, you could tell. And when he's getting into those post moves now, he's getting into his post moves now. Like he's got that drop step, he's got the spin, he's got the pivot that he's getting to. And I think you're right. I think you're spot on.
Sorry to cut you off here, but what do you think of that block by Keegan Murray when Jaime was under the basket? Bam had a nice play where he found Jaime. He was at the top of the key, winds up finding Jaime under the basket. It just created he was wide open there. And then Murray flies out from any. Was it a goaltend? Was it just a lack of athleticism? I mean, Jaime was under the basket, so there's not much he can do unless he's explosive enough to dunk it and reverse dunk. But do you think that he could have done something a little different so that he could have gotten an easier look at the rim that wouldn't have been blocked?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it looked like a clean block to me on the first. I didn't watch it multiple times, but no, I think that's just the kind of thing where, even Bam has talked about this, where, having a little bit more patience under the basket, not feeling as rushed, something that he learned from Dwayne Wade. And that sort of opened up stuff under the rim for Bam. I think that just sort of comes with time for Jaime, but it was also just a great play by Keegan Murray, who was sensational in this game defensively. Like, he was great off the ball. They had him guarding Tyler Hero late in this game, which I thought was a really good adjustment by Doug Christie. So that's more credit to Keegan Murray. But in terms of what's next for Jaime, you heard Erik Spoelstra talk about this a lot when Jaime was a rookie. He's really great at eating up space. Was sort of the phrase that he used a lot. And when he has the ball in his hands, he's able to eat up that space, right? And I love Jaime as like a slot cutter. He's got really good timing, really good awareness of when his defender, the guy who's responsible for him, kind of turns his head, and he's got good timing on that. The problem is the Heat don't have great point guards to get him the ball. Like this Heat offense is very much sort of Bam dribble handoffs and screening for Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero. There's not really a guy who's, getting the defense to commit in the paint, touching the paint, getting the defense to commit, and then kind of opening up those other options here, which is, again, why they wanted Jimmy Butler playing point guard a little bit here, which, again, is something that Bernie Lee said on Twitter and everybody else has been asking for. Jimmy Butler doesn't want to do it. Again, not talking about that, even though I keep trying to talk about it. But if Jaime is doing it, I do think it opens things up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Spo's rotation decisions here in a second when we get to our questions. But I think that's why you see Terry Rozier in the lineup. That's why you see Jaime Jaquez in the lineup instead of Nikola Jovic in this one. It's because they are trying desperately to create that. They're trying to find somebody who can get downhill, get into the paint, and force the defense to rotate, force the defense to commit, and open things up, not just for Tyler Hero, who was great off the ball in this one, but for everybody else. And if it turns out to be Jaime, then those cuts aren't going to be as available. But obviously, maybe some triple doubles are potentially available for him instead, which is fine. But yeah, I think everybody's just trying to find their way post Jimmy Butler. I think that's sort of where we are now. So yeah, you do hope that this is a step in the right direction for Jaime in this game. But Bill Simmons came up with an interesting concept that would send Jimmy Butler to the Memphis Grizzlies, a polarizing star from a different team, to Miami. We break down that trade. Plus, we get to those Erik Spoelstra roster lineup decisions next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with PrizePicks. Whether you're a diehard fan or you just love some friendly competition, PrizePicks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. If you think LeBron's going to drop 30 points, or maybe Luka Doncic is getting more than 8 assists, well, PrizePicks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. And with PrizePicks' flex play option, even if one of your picks doesn't hit, you can still double your money. And plus, once you do hit, you get that money fast, sometimes as quick as 15 minutes. It's honestly the best way to keep the game exciting. Now is the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. And you get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Just download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. PrizePicks. Run your game. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Before we get to our Locked On Heat Insider community questions, I got a question for you, David.
Yeah.
What did you think about Erik Spoelstra's lineup decision in this one? So, quick recap. Against the Jazz, he goes with Terry Rozier, returning to the starting lineup after he was removed after 12 games of the season. So it was Rozier, Hero, Haywood Highsmith, Nikola Jovic, and Bam. They lose that game by 1 billion points. Spo decides that didn't work. And then in this game, goes with Rozier still, Hero, Jaime, Haywood Highsmith, and Bam. What did you make of the starting lineup decision and I guess the rotation overall?
I think Duncan should continue to start. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I understand the concerns with him as a defender and everything else like that, but I think there's just offensively, he greases the wheel so much, whether the shot's falling or not, you have to respect his presence out there. And I think like when they were making their run and when it seemed like they were playing at their very best, I think Duncan was out in the lineup. I don't know exactly what his plus minus was. He was a +2 or -2 on the night. So I mean, again,
but it was weird because they were up. I had it written down. They were up 9 with 4.5 minutes left. And yeah, they were up 9 with 4.5 minutes left. Duncan comes out for Terry Rozier, and then they give up the rest of that lead. Now, granted, they had given up half of that lead already because they were up 17 with Duncan Robinson in the game. And Terry Rozier actually was pretty good in this game. He was a -2 overall, but that was because of the double overtimes. I think he was a +5 at the end of regulation. So hard to say, but I am with you. I think Duncan Robinson should continue to start because if you just did Tyler, Duncan, Jaime, Haywood, and Bam, that's essentially the lineup that was winning you a lot of games with Jaime in the Jimmy Butler spot. And if functionally that's what you like to do, then why wouldn't you stay with it? And that's not to say, like, obviously Jaime is not as good as Jimmy Butler. We just got done with the whole segment about why he's been struggling this season. But like functionally, that is what you were trying to do. This is what I was trying to like kind of hinting at before. Erik Spoelstra has clearly decided over the last week, Tyler Hero can't be the point guard of the team. And I don't know quite why, because he went from asking Jimmy Butler essentially to be the point guard of the team to, okay, Jimmy's suspended. We're going to have Terry Rozier now be the point guard because Terry's started these last 2 games. Or even in this game, having Jaime Jaquez bring the ball up on a lot of these possessions, or sometimes Nikola Jovic, whoever it is. And it's not to say Tyler Hero obviously brings the ball up some, but I thought his best moments were still when he was, in the second half at least, was bringing the ball up. I don't really know why that's the case. I understand that you're trying to make things easier for Tyler Hero because he is such a good catch and shoot guy. You're trying to open that part of the offense up. And generally speaking, you can't just rely on one guy to who's not basically Luka Doncic or prime James Harden these days to run your entire offense. And Tyler Hero, as good as he is not that. He's just a different kind of player. Is that it? Is that just is it just sort of trying to diversify the offense? Is that something that Erik Spoelstra decided? Why do you think he's been so committed to trying to force a point guard into the starting lineup?
I'm not sure. I really don't know. I don't know if it's just old habits or, I mean, again, it feels like the idea of just sticking with positionality for a coach like Erik Spoelstra seems so typical. I mean, I know there are players.
Yeah, I don't think it's positionality though, but I think like he was trying somebody to handle the ball that's not Tyler. Like I said, he was trying to make it Jimmy before. He made it Jaime tonight.
I guess, Tyler, to put him more in that catch and shoot role in which he was thriving, kind
Mhm.
of take some of the offensive burden off of Bam so he could be a little bit more effective, et cetera. Although, I mean, we're finished talking about why he'd be better with the ball in his hands, creating opportunities for himself in transition. So I don't know. I think,
No, I think that's a good point. Trying to get Bam a little bit more involved, that makes some sense, right? Try to get pick and roll stuff, get him on the lob, things like that.
sure.
Whatever the reason is, I don't know. We'll see if he sticks with it. You want to venture a guess for the starting lineup against Golden State tonight? I suppose Tuesday night.
Yeah, I think they said everybody. Like, I can't imagine them playing.
You
Like
said everybody.
that's a loss. Like, I mean, I know you can put them out there, but you got to leave now after a double overtime loss. You're demoralized. It's already tough enough. I can't. I mean, Tyler will play. I think he'll start because he's Tyler. Um, I
Bam
might
will
just
play.
start Khalil over. You think Bam will play? I mean, I would sit him at this
Captain of the
point, give him a
team.
day off. Yeah, I guess, but I mean, not that make a difference with Jimmy. But I guess Haywood could play. I'd probably go with Nico at the 4 spot. Duncan at the start. Switch things out. I mean, around a little bit. I mean, maybe Alec Burks gets a start. Who knows? With Spo, you never can quite tell exactly what he's going to do. But
I
I don't
wonder if
know.
we get this. We might just get the same starting lineup. You're not really worried. Golden State runs so small. They're starting Steph, Dennis Schroeder, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and Trace Jackson Davis. You can have Bam and Haywood out there, not worry about spacing or anything like that. Jaime can be in there to guard. You can have Jaime just basically play off of essentially Draymond if you want on defense, and then Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier can chase Steph around, and then Hero can just sort of like relax on Dennis Schroeder for a little while. So I don't know. We might get this. My guess would be we get the same starters, but I could be wrong. Let's get to these questions from the Locked On Heat Insider community. Not only is it your first dibs at asking questions for our post-game shows here, but also it's your one-stop shop for all of your Jimmy Butler updates as we kind of go along with this process. So we've been sending updates, not just with our own reporting, but the national reporting that's been happening. So you don't have to go searching through Twitter or online or looking at different websites to try to find out what's going on with Jimmy. We just send it to you several times a day. Maybe it's not right away, but it's pretty quick. We do our best to send it as soon as we can. And we're also available for one-on-one answers to your questions. But let's get to your questions from the post-game show. Andrew writes in, I know we're never going to tank per se, but what are the odds that we keep our pick and push for something in the draft? I would say pretty low at this point. The Heat can't afford to miss the playoffs this year, because if they do that, then their pick becomes it's a top 14 owed to OKC this year. But if they miss the playoffs, they keep their pick this summer, but then it becomes unprotected in 2026. And then that has a domino effect because it kicks the Charlotte pick that they owe for the Terry Rozier trade from 2027, which is protected, to 2028 unprotected. So if you miss the playoffs, essentially, as the Miami Heat, you go from owing 2 protected picks, which is already not awesome, to owing 2 unprotected picks 2 years apart, which in a post Jimmy Butler world, that's really risky. That kind of leaves you pretty naked and kind of out there in the wind, not knowing what those picks can end up being. So this team's very motivated to make the playoffs.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything either. Like, I mean, I think
It
there was
doesn't mean they're
equal
going to.
motivation over
Sure.
the last
Yeah.
few seasons. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Fair
I
enough.
don't know if I necessarily have faith in this group. Like, I mean, tonight's loss was so up and down in terms of what this team is capable of, and you hate to see it because I mean, it kind of was reminiscent of that loss in Orlando, where they were again without Jimmy Butler, and they looked great and they looked dominant. They were up. What was it? I can't recall the exact score at this point. 20 something in the fourth quarter, and they wound up blowing that game to a Magic team that was without their 2 best players and missing some other key players at the time as well. And it's just you can't have these kinds of losses. Something has to give. And I know we're asking a lot of Bam, but he's got to be better. And I don't know who else on this roster can and will step up, but somebody has to. And I think Tyler's doing his share. If you're looking at him as just being the top scorer on this team, well, he certainly has been, and he's been great in that role. But somebody else has to do something more, or it's just a matter of realization that this roster is really deficient, and it just does not have either a 1A player, might not have a 2A player. your best player on this team might be Tyler Hero. And if that's the case, as we've talked about before, he's probably best suited for being your third option. It's not great. That's not a great place to be.
They need more. Bam is your superstar. He's your captain. Sorry, this is the territory. As hard as we were on Jimmy Butler, we have to. And the difference between Jimmy and Bam is I never questioned Bam's effort. With Jimmy, there was always a question of his level of engagement on a game-to-game basis. But regardless,
you saw him be able to raise it up to that next level. And
yes,
we have yet to see him. Bam. If he could raise the game to that next level, then he probably would. So he just has to be a little bit more consistently good, even if he's not great all the time as far as being able to reach the highs that Jimmy was capable of reaching.
In terms of the scoring, he was great defensively in this game.
Yes,
4 skills in this game. So, but you know what? When you're the captain, when you're the max player, when there's no Jimmy Butler, there's just more. You got to keep shoveling this bleep onto your plate. Sorry, Bam. That's the role. That's the gig. Andrew writes, sends us the Bill Simmons trade idea. So Simmons tweeted this out a couple of days ago, and they want our take on it. So here's a trade. Try to keep up. There's 4 teams involved. The New Orleans Pelicans get Tim Hardaway Jr., Luke Kennard, and Gigi Jackson. The Heat get Zion Williamson and Brandon Clark. The Grizzlies get Jimmy Butler, and the Pistons get Marcus Smart. And within Simmons' tweet, he mentions, send the draft picks wherever they got to go, but these are the players. And then you can easily, and this is true because I tried it, you could swap out Zion for Brandon Ingram if you'd prefer that. So your thoughts on this 4-team trade, David, that sends Jimmy Butler to the Memphis Grizzlies?
Yeah, I'm fine with it, to be honest with you. I mean, we talked about it yesterday that we didn't think we'd get any kind of star return. And while Zion Williamson, and the book is still out on him, he's at least a name and certainly would draw some tickets sales for sure. And there's potential there. I mean, we've seen him be very, very good in those games when he's available. I don't know that he'll ever be healthy, but I wonder what will happen in Miami's system if they can get him to drop weight, if they can get him to stay healthy. It's a big if. But if you can get that kind of return for a player like Jimmy, I think that's really solid. And some picks in the process, absolutely.
When Zion's right, he's one of the best 10, 15 players in the NBA. He's dominant offensively. Like he's literally as dominant in the paint as Shaq and Giannis when you look at the numbers. Like that's how good he is in the paint. He's unstoppable. He's a tough guy to build around for sure. But the Heat have made big runs in the postseason with tough guys to build around before, like Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. So if anybody's going to make the most out of it on the court in terms of schematics, it's Erik Spoelstra. And like you said already, if anybody can kind of whip him into shape, it would be the Heat culture. And so it would be interesting to try it. And fortunately, you're able to waive this contract basically at any point because it comes non-guaranteed for the next 3 years after this season. So if it doesn't work out for the rest of this season or even next season, you kind of have a get out of jail free card on it. Yeah. So when you look at Miami and what they should be looking for in a Jimmy Butler trade in terms of the cap flexibility, it's not only cap flexibility for this summer, but it's the summer for 2026 when Luka Doncic, Kevin Durant, De'Aaron Fox, all these other guys can potentially become free agents if they don't sign extensions beforehand. And my only question would be, if you're the Heat, is there somebody that you would rather, or some bodies, plural, that you would rather have this summer with your cap space than Zion Williamson? Or do you think Zion is the best you can do? And I think that's a fair question considering, his health risks and everything like that. And if the Heat decide, you know what, this is a decent lottery ticket. And this is what I always say, when you trade a star, hopefully you get a lottery ticket to get another star. Maybe Zion's the best you could do. And if this is a 4-team deal that puts Jimmy in Memphis and lands Zion in Miami and a bunch of other things going other ways, I don't know. There's some mornings I wake up and I hate the idea, and other mornings I wake up and I'm like, yeah, give it a shot. Why not? But that'll do it for us today. Oh, go ahead. You like it. You're in.
No, I like it. And I like Brandon Clark too. I think he's a fine player. Again, a guy who's battled injury. But I mean, he's shown a lot of potential and some nice moments. He's undersized the center. Yeah.
Both front court spots. Yeah. Do
you like the deal?
If you don't have to give up picks, I don't hate the deal. I don't. It would be exciting. It would be fun for us to talk about. So yeah, you know what? It's 2 a.m. I'm a little punchy. Sign me up. Let's do it. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.